Some voices follow you past the grave. My name is Ellen. I'm 42 years old and have been a hospice nurse for 17 years. Death, to me, used to be a gentle visitor, quiet, patient, and respectful. I believed there was peace in the process. That belief held firm through hundreds of goodbyes, until I was assigned to room 9. I never liked that room. It was in the east wing, tucked at the end of the hall where the lights flickered more than they should. The window latch was broken, so the cold always slipped in, no matter the season. It had a smell too. Not bad, just old like dust, soaked in memories. Some of the newer nurses avoided it, said it gave them a feeling, heavy in the chest, like someone was watching them. But we don't choose our assignments. And I was the most experienced, so room 9 became mine. Thomas Lowry, aged 81, moved in after being diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Quiet man, former librarian, lived alone for years. No children, no visitors. His only request was to be placed somewhere silent. We granted him that. He was polite, gentle in conversation, but from the first night, I knew something was off. He whispered, constantly, not to me, not even to himself, but to the corner of the room, the darkest one, just to the left of the window. It was never loud, never frantic, just soft whispers, the kind you use when you don't want to wake someone. At first I thought it was a habit. Some patients talk in their sleep, especially those on heavy medication, but Mr. Lowry was fully lucid. His mind was clear. He never used the morphine, unless the pain became unbearable. One night, just before I checked out of my shift, I asked him gently, Mr. Lowry, may I ask, who are you speaking to? He turned his pale blue eyes toward me, calm, clear. She's waiting, he said. I smiled awkwardly, thinking he meant a wife or a long-lost sister. Who is she? He didn't answer right away, just turned back to the dark corner. I don't know her name, he whispered, but she comes every night. I didn't sleep well that night. I started paying closer attention during my shifts. When he ate, when he slept, when the whispering began. It always started just after midnight. Like clockwork, he would stare at the corner and murmur to it, like it was answering him somehow. I asked Dr. Patel to check him for signs of hallucination or early onset dementia. Everything came back normal. A few nights later, I stayed a bit longer, just to ease my own curiosity. At 12:03 a.m., the whispering began. I stood in the hallway, just outside his room, and listened. There were two voices. One was definitely Mr. Lowry's, the other, faint, feminine, muffled, like it was coming from deep under the floor, or behind the wall. I froze. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the old ventilation system, or maybe an echo, but deep down, I knew better. I went back inside. Mr. Lowry stopped speaking as soon as I entered. He looked at me and smiled, a strange kind of smile, like he pitied me. She says you listen too closely, he said. She doesn't like that. I told myself it was a nightmare. I even took a few nights off, blaming exhaustion, but something about room 9 pulled at me. I had to see it through. On the night he died, the wind outside was louder than usual. The tree outside the window scratched against the glass like it was trying to get in. I sat beside him, holding his hand. He looked so peaceful, almost ready, but then he turned his head to the dark corner. She's here, he whispered. I squeezed his hand gently. It's okay. You're safe. His eyes never left the corner. His breathing slowed. Then he smiled again. Not at me, at whatever was behind me. She'll want to speak with you next, he said. His grip tightened around my fingers. Then he died. There was no dramatic moment, no gasping, just stillness. I turned to the corner, empty, or so I thought. As I stood, something caught my eye. The chair by the window, The one no one ever used was rocking, not from the wind. The draft always came from the opposite side, and this was steady, slow, as if someone had just stood up. I left the room immediately. I didn't say a word to anyone, not that night. The next morning, the charge nurse found me sitting in my car. I had been there for hours. I couldn't bring myself to go home. In the weeks that followed, I tried to forget. I returned to my routine, took other patients, but something had changed. At night, just as I close my eyes, I hear it, a whisper, not loud, not urgent, just present. Sometimes it says my name, sometimes it just breathes. I tried recording the sounds. I left my phone on my nightstand, reviewed hours of audio, nothing, just silence. But I hear it, inside my head, inside my ears. It's like a presence behind my thoughts, always just about to say something but never quite loud enough. I haven't returned to room 9 since. They tell the new nurses it's under renovation. That's not true, but no one asks twice. Last week I passed the door. The light inside was off. The doorknob was cold. The air, wrong, but the chair, I could hear it, creaking, rocking, as if someone was still waiting. I keep telling myself there must be a rational explanation. Stress, guilt, fatigue. But deep down, I know some rooms don't empty when a patient dies. Some voices don't stop just because the heart does. And some presences, they whisper long after you're ready to listen. Some things keep time differently in dying rooms. My name is Grace. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a night shift hospice nurse for just over 6 years. There's something about the nighttime that changes people, patients, staff, even the air itself. It feels slower, denser. Every sound is louder, every silence longer. People don't like working nights, but for me, it always felt more respectful, like I was keeping vigil with the dying. Then came Evelyn. She was only 56, which made her one of our youngest residents. End-stage ovarian cancer. She had no family. She arrived mid-November, quiet and withdrawn, but there was something about her that immediately struck me. It was her eyes. She looked aware, not alert in the usual way, but like she knew things no one else did. She was placed in room 4B. That room had always been cold, but the space heater fixed that easily enough. What it didn't fix though was the ticking. It started her third night. I had just finished giving her evening meds and was walking out when I heard it. Tick, tick, faint but deliberate, not from a wall clock. We didn't have any in the patient rooms. Phones and oxygen machines made that risky. The sound was too close anyway, like it was right under the bed. I turned and asked her, "Evelyn, do you have a watch or something in the blankets?" She just stared at me. "Do you hear that?" I added. She nodded. "It's always been there." I assumed she meant since arriving, so I knelt and checked under the bed. Nothing. No clock, no device, just the standard tile floor and a shadow that didn't quite match the lighting. That night, I couldn't shake it. The ticking stayed in my ears long after I left her room. It wasn't just rhythmic, it had intention, like each tick was counting something down. The next evening, I mentioned it again while checking her vitals. "Did you find where it's coming from?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "It doesn't want to be found." Her tone wasn't frightened, it was resigned. That bothered me more than if she'd screamed. Over the next few nights, I started noticing a pattern. Every time I walked past her room, the ticking grew louder, and she became quieter. She stopped eating, stopped asking for pain meds, just lay there, listening to it, waiting. On the 8th night, I stayed longer. "Evelyn," I said softly, "can I ask you something personal?" She didn't speak, just nodded. "What do you think that sound is?" She turned her head slowly toward me. "It's the clock I swallowed when I was a child." I blinked. "You swallowed a clock?" Not really, she said, almost smiling. But it feels like it. It's in me now. She tapped her chest. I sat there with her for an hour, neither of us speaking. The ticking continued. I started to feel it, not just in my ears, in my bones, like my own body was adjusting to it. Tick, tick. The next day, I asked the maintenance team to sweep the room for any hidden device. They found nothing. Evelyn didn't speak again after that. Not to me, not to anyone. But on the 12th night, as I entered to check on her, she opened her eyes wide. She hissed. "It's getting closer." I stood frozen at the foot of the bed. The ticking was louder than ever. I crouched again, feeling compelled to look beneath the bed. I didn't want to. Everything in me screamed not to. But I did, and I saw it. A clock. An old wind-up alarm clock. Rusted, dust-covered, but moving. Its hands ticked backward, not fast, just enough to see it. I reached for it. My fingers passed right through. I jerked back and hit my head on the frame. When I looked again, it was gone. Evelyn was staring straight at the ceiling, tears running down the sides of her face. "I thought I had more time," she whispered. I left the room and didn't go back in for the rest of the shift. The next night, she died. No struggle, no dramatic gasp, just silence. I wasn't there when it happened. I was down the hall helping another nurse. But when we returned to check on her, the aide who found her said the weirdest thing. She must have dropped her clock. I heard ticking when I walked in, but it stopped right when I touched her. There was no clock in the room, just her body, eyes closed, lips parted in mid-whisper. We packed her things. She had very little. A photo of a field, a paperback novel she never read, and a small folded note that I found under her pillow. It said, "Time doesn't heal. It waits, and then it comes back." I didn't sleep that night. Since then I've avoided room 4B as much as possible. But last week, I had to help a new nurse do rounds. As we passed by the door, she paused. "You hear that?" she asked. I didn't want to, but I did. Tick, tick. Only this time, it was in sync with my heartbeat. I've started hearing it elsewhere now. In my apartment, in the elevator, in my dreams. Always faint, always steady. I'm trying not to think about it too much. But the part that scares me the most, I checked my bedside clock last night. The digital one I've had since college. It was running backward. Not fast, just enough to notice. So I unplugged it, and I still hear it ticking, right under my bed. Some places don't forget who was meant to die there. It was raining that night, not a soft cleansing rain, the kind that makes you reflect. This was something heavier. It made the air thick, like even the walls were sweating. My name is Jerome. I'm a 58-year-old hospice janitor, and I've worked at Grayson Care for close to 2 decades. I'm not a nurse. I don't handle medications or comfort families. I sweep, mop, disinfect. People look through me, but I see everything. What they whisper, what they regret, what they leave behind in drawers they think no one checks. And sometimes, I hear things they don't. It started after room 9 was reopened. That room had been empty for 3 months. We don't normally keep rooms sealed off that long. But the last resident, a woman named Martha Crowley, passed in the middle of the night during a code blue. No one could explain why it affected everyone so badly. She was expected to go, yet something about her death shook the staff, even the seasoned ones. After she passed, the door stayed shut, the lights stayed off. Housekeeping stopped including it on rounds. The room just sort of slipped out of circulation until Dennis came in. Dennis McGuire, age 82, lung cancer, quiet as a whisper, no family, no complaints. When all other rooms were full, they placed him in 9. That's when things went wrong. The very next night, as I was finishing my rounds, I passed room 9 and heard what sounded like humming, soft, childlike, a lullaby. I paused. Patience hummed sometimes, but this didn't sound like a man. It was higher, breathy, and off-tempo, like it didn't care about finishing the tune. I peeked in. Dennis was fast asleep, breathing heavy, face turned toward the window, but the sound kept going. I stepped in. The room was ice cold. I checked the vents. No airflow. Then the light flickered, not fully off, just that slight dimming, the kind that makes you think your eyes are adjusting wrong. I left quickly. The next night, I brought it up to Nurse Farley. She looked at me like I was talking nonsense. Room 9's just a room, she said, typing something on her tablet. We cleaned it. Nothing in there but an old man dying quietly. But I knew what I'd heard, so I kept watch. A few nights later, I was doing my usual mop pass near the west wing when the humming started again. This time it was clearer. It wasn't a lullaby. It was a name. Martha. Martha. I dropped my mop, walked to the door. Dennis was awake, sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner of the room. His hands were clenched in the sheets. Mr. Maguire, I asked gently, everything all right? He didn't look at me. Someone's mad, he whispered. She said this is her room. I didn't know what to say. She keeps asking why I'm in her bed, he added. Said she's not done with it yet. I left quickly, told the night nurse, but of course they chalked it up to morphine confusion. 2 days later, Dennis coded and died. I was the one assigned to clean the room afterward. I didn't want to. I even asked to swap shifts, but there's no one else for nights. So I put on the gloves and opened the door. It smelled like roses. That's not normal. Hospice rooms never smell like roses. I started clearing the bedside stand and saw something strange. A small piece of torn paper wedged in the drawer. It had only 3 words. She remembers everything. I kept it. Still have it. I tried to forget about it. I did. But then came the new resident, Clarice Henley. Room 9 again. That's when I made the mistake of asking the night nurse a question I should have asked long ago. Where was Martha Crowley supposed to be placed? The nurse blinked. What do you mean? I mean when she died. Was 9 her assigned room originally? She checked the old logs. Her face changed. No, she whispered. Martha was assigned to room 6, but there was a bed delay, so they put her in 9 for just 1 night. 1 night, the night she died. They buried her under room 6's name. Her name never belonged to 9, but her death did, and that's the thing, isn't it? Some places don't forget. Clarisse lasted 4 days. I overheard her muttering to herself the last night. She keeps asking for her bed, she said to no one. She keeps asking for her name back. They found her in the morning, sitting on the floor, facing the window, gone. No signs of struggle, just stillness. They moved her body to the holding room, and I was told again, clean it out. This time I brought salt. I don't believe in ghosts the way movies show them, but I believe in energy, in memory, in unfinished presence. I scattered the salt across the floor, whispering whatever prayer I could remember from Sunday school, and as I turned to leave, I heard it again. Jerome, my name, in a woman's voice. I didn't turn around. I shut the door. I left the mop and bucket in there, and never went back. Now I work in the East Wing, but sometimes, when the rain's heavy enough, I hear the humming again. Soft, wrong. Sometimes, I find rose petals near the trash bins. There are no roses at Grace and Care, and once, I found my name written in the dust behind a hallway mirror. No one else saw it, or maybe they did, and just didn't say anything. The worst part, room 9 is still in use. People keep dying in it, quietly, wrongfully, and I wonder, did we bury Martha Crowley in the wrong place, or did we bury her before she was ready? Some voices never leave the walls. I never meant to discover it. I wish I hadn't. But there are some things that find you, no matter how hard you try to avoid them. My name is Claudia, 47 years old. I'm a night shift nurse at Hillview Rehabilitation Center. I've worked here for almost 12 years, and over the years, I've become accustomed to the usual sounds, the distant beeping of monitors, the faint shuffle of slippers in the hallways, the soft murmurs of patients lost in their dreams. Most of the time, it's easy to block out the unease, to pretend that nothing strange is happening around me. But this was different. I remember it was a Thursday night when it began. The rain was steady outside, a soft tapping against the windows. I was in the ICU ward, checking on a patient named George. He had been bedridden for months, and lately, he had become increasingly agitated. He kept muttering something about someone calling him, and a name in the air. I didn't think much of it at first. Old people say strange things, but that night, as I adjusted his IV line, I noticed something peculiar, a soft sound, a whisper. At first I thought it was just the hum of the machines, the usual white noise that fills the space. But as I listened more closely, it wasn't the machines, it wasn't the wind either. It came from somewhere deeper, somewhere within the walls, a voice so faint I could barely hear it. At first it was just a sound, a murmur I couldn't quite make out, but then it grew clearer, until I could hear it. Claudia, Claudia, Claudia. I froze. The voice called my name. I turned, my breath catching in my chest, looking around the dimly lit room. Claudia, it whispered again, this time softer, as though it was right behind me. I checked the monitors again, my hands trembling as I tried to focus. George was still breathing steadily, his eyes closed in a peaceful slumber. But the voice, it wasn't his. It wasn't coming from the patient. I walked to the window, peering into the corridor to see if someone had come in, or if another nurse was speaking. But there was nothing. The hallway was empty, lit only by the faint glow of the overhead lights. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I returned to the room, trying to shake off the unease. I told myself it was just the rain, the wind, the stress of the night shift. But it wasn't. The voice, it lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me. I couldn't ignore it. After checking on a few more patients, I went to the storage room, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The hum of the building, the creaks in the floorboards, they all seemed so off, but I brushed it aside. It was just the building settling, just my tired mind playing tricks on me. I had just grabbed a clean set of sheets when I heard it again. Claudia. This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a clear, unmistakable voice, echoing through the air. I whipped around, my heart racing, and glanced toward the vent. The voice, it was coming from there. I felt the blood drain from my face. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the vent, waiting for the voice to speak again. But there was nothing. I stepped closer, hesitant, my hand trembling as I reached for the vent. I couldn't explain why, but I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening. When I touched the metal, I heard it again, louder now, as if someone was pressing their mouth against the grate. Claudia, please. I stumbled back, my breath coming in short gasps. The sound, the voice, it wasn't just calling my name anymore. It was asking for help. I ran to the nurse's station and found Linda, one of the other nurses. She was sitting at the desk, filling out paperwork. Did you hear that? I asked, my voice shaky. She looked up, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? The voice, I said, almost pleading. There's something in the walls. It called my name. Linda raised an eyebrow, clearly not believing me. You've been working too many hours, Claudia. You need to take a break. But I knew what I heard. I wasn't imagining it. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept hearing it in my head. The soft whispers, the calling of my name. The next morning, after my shift, I came back in. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I went to the maintenance office, found someone there, and asked them to check the vents. "You think there's something in the walls?" the maintenance guy asked, smirking. "We've had a few rats, but nothing like that. Just check them, please," I insisted. He agreed, though he looked amused, and we made our way back to the ICU. I led him to the room where I had heard the voice, and he began to unscrew the vent cover. The moment it came off, I felt the temperature drop. The air shifted, like something had just left the room. "Nothing," he said. "No pipes, no wires, no rodents." But when he turned to leave, I felt it again. A whisper, faint but there, coming from deep within the wall. "Claudia." I didn't say anything, didn't even look at the maintenance man. I just walked out of the room. Later that night, I came back after my shift ended. I had to see for myself. The voices were still in my head, pulling at me, driving me crazy. I stood in the ICU hallway, my back pressed to the wall, staring at the vent. And then I heard it again. A different voice this time, one I didn't recognize. "You don't belong here," it said. I was frozen in place. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I wasn't alone. I could feel something in the room, watching me. That night, I could hear the voice every time I passed the vent. It never stopped. It was like it had been waiting for me, just waiting for me to listen. I wasn't sure if it was a person trapped within the walls, or if it was something darker, something that had always been there, waiting for a way to reach out. I never went back to that hallway again. I don't know what I heard that night. I don't know if it was real, or if my mind had simply cracked from exhaustion. But I know this much: some voices never leave. They become a part of the walls, the air, the very building itself. And no matter how much you try to ignore them, they will always find a way to make themselves heard. In the silence, shadows speak the truth we fear to hear. I still hear the whispers sometimes, in the dark, when I close my eyes. My name is Patrick. I'm 53 years old, and I've been a hospice nurse for over 20 years. I've worked with the dying, the lost, and the forgotten. But there's one patient I can never forget. One name, one voice, that will forever echo in my mind. And it was in the final hours of their life that I truly understood what it means to never really leave. It was late autumn when the incident happened, a cool, gray evening where the light seemed to vanish too quickly and the shadows stretched longer than usual. I was assigned to care for an elderly man named Thomas. He was in his late 70s, suffering from a terminal illness that had left him weak and frail. He'd been in the hospice for a few weeks, and I had seen him deteriorate slowly, each day weaker than the last. Thomas wasn't an easy patient. He was restless, plagued by delusions and deep sorrow. He would talk about strange things, about people he claimed he could see in the corner of the room, people who weren't there. At first I thought it was the medication, the morphine clouding his mind, but it was the things he said that unnerved me. "They're watching," he would whisper, his eyes darting around the room. "They're waiting for me." I'd ask him who, but he would never answer. He'd just stare at the wall, his eyes filled with fear. I thought he was hallucinating, the product of a dying mind. But deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was, but every time I entered his room, the air felt thick, suffocating, as if it was closing in on me. One night, I stayed late. The night shift had just begun, and I was making my rounds when I noticed the dim light coming from Thomas's room. He was sitting up in bed, his hands clutching the sheets tightly. His face was pale, his eyes wide, as if something had terrified him beyond belief. "Patrick," he croaked, his voice strained. They're here for me." I walked into the room and checked his vitals, but his gaze never left the shadows in the corner. The room was nearly pitch dark, save for the small nightlight by his bed. His skin was clammy, his breath shallow, but it wasn't the illness that made him look like that. It was fear. Real, tangible fear. "Who's here, Thomas?" I asked gently, trying to calm him down. "Who's here for you?" His eyes flickered toward me, but there was no recognition in them, just terror. He pointed a shaking finger toward the far corner of the room. "They're waiting. They want me to join them. Can't you hear them?" I turned toward the corner, my heart skipping a beat. The shadows in the room seemed to move, to shift in a way that didn't make sense. I tried to dismiss it. I tried to convince myself it was just the angle of the light, the natural movement of the shadows in the room. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, something felt wrong. "I don't hear anything, Thomas," I said, but my voice trembled. "There's nothing there. It's just you and me." But Thomas wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on the shadows, his mouth moving as if speaking to someone I couldn't see. "They're calling me. I have to go to them." His words chilled me to the bone. I had seen patients in their final moments speak of strange things, relatives they had lost, people they had never met. But this was different. This wasn't a peaceful farewell. This was something darker. The way he spoke, the terror in his voice, it was as if he was being pulled into something he couldn't escape. I tried to comfort him, to hold his hand, but the moment my fingers touched his, something cold seeped into my skin. It wasn't the normal chill of a dying body. It was something else, something unnatural. Suddenly his eyes widened even further, and he let out a scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure unbridled terror. He thrashed against the bed, his limbs jerking violently. "They're here. They're here." His voice cracked as he struggled. "I don't want to go. Please help me." I shouted for help, but there was no time. In the instant his scream echoed through the room. The shadows in the corner seemed to grow. They stretched, as if reaching out toward him, toward me. And in that moment, I saw them. Figures, faint outlines in the darkness, impossibly still. They weren't people, they were shapes, but they were watching us. I felt a cold rush of air, a sudden weight pressing down on my chest, and in that breathless second, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The shadows were moving closer. They weren't just shadows, they were something else, something that had been waiting. Thomas gasped, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His breathing became erratic, shallow, as if something was choking him. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the briefest moment, I saw something that wasn't fear. It was resignation. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely audible. "I didn't want you to see them. I didn't want you to hear them." And then, just as quickly as it had started, Thomas fell silent. His body went limp, his eyes closed, and the room was still. I stood there, frozen, staring at him. For a moment I couldn't move. My mind was trying to process what had just happened. Was it the end? Had he passed peacefully, or had something darker taken him? But I knew the answer. Something had taken him. Something that had been waiting in those shadows for a long time. The next morning, when I returned to check on Thomas, his room was empty. The bed was neatly made, and there was no trace of what had occurred the night before. No sign of the shadows, no sign of the terror. It was as if everything had been erased. But I remember the whispers. Every night, I hear them, soft at first, then louder, until they fill the room. I never sleep. I can't. They follow me, even after I leave the hospice. When I close my eyes, they're there, speaking in hushed voices, whispering things I can't understand. Sometimes, they say my name. Sometimes, they say others. I can't escape them. I know now that Thomas wasn't just talking about people. He was talking about the things that haunt this place, the things that wait in the shadows, waiting for the moment when they can claim their next soul. And when they do, they never leave.